Vaccines really are on the horizon.
This morning, a second coronavirus vaccine trial is proving successful. And now the race is on to get a vaccine to the front lines of this pandemic.
Enough by the end of December to vaccinate 20 million of our most vulnerable citizens.
But a political battle over the presidency could create a speed bump for Operation Warp Speed.
It's almost like passing a baton in a race. You don't want to stop and then give it to somebody. You want to just essentially keep going. It certainly would make things more smoothly if we could do that.
Thank you for joining us on Denver7 News at 11. I'm Jacqueline Allen. We'll bring you the latest on a second coronavirus vaccine, proving to be more than 90% effective in just a moment. First, we want to get to the latest COVID-19 rates here in Colorado and the response to stop this spread. The state has confirmed more than 4,100 new cases in the last 24 hours. That's high, but still a drop from the record-setting numbers we saw last week. Our positivity rate is also down a little. Even with the drop in testing over the weekend, the percentage of tests is still coming back positive is still well over 13%. The goal is to be below 5%. That surge that you just saw is putting a strain on our hospitals. More than 1,400 COVID patients are getting hospital care right now. That's about 16% of all available hospital beds across the state. And nearly half of all ventilators are in use. Health officials say everyone needs to step up to ensure that our health system doesn't become overloaded. The chief medical officer at UC Health says they are seeing more COVID patients now than they did last spring. Statewide, hospitals have activated the combined hospital transfer system.
You can think of Tier 1 as essentially a buddy plan where we've paired up all of the hospitals throughout the state. So in the case of a rural hospital who is having perhaps their first COVID surge, and they end up with more patients than they have the resources to care for, they can call their buddy hospital and effect a transfer quickly and easily. Kind of one call does it all.
The Colorado Hospital Association says there's real concern about this surge extending into the Thanksgiving holiday. She says people need to practice social distancing, wear their masks, wash their hands, and avoid people from other households. And because of the rising case numbers today, thousands of Colorado students returned to online learning. Denver7's Nicole Brady is in Golden with a look at plans that won't allow most students back to in-person learning until next semester.
As of today, the school behind me, Golden High School, will be a lot quieter. No kids in the hallways until the calendar says 2021. And it's the same for other middle and high schoolers here in Jeffco. Elementary students in Jeffco will have the rest of this week, and then they'll be fully remote too. And this is the same story for school districts all across the metro. Starting today, Adams 12 is fully remote. Boulder Valley schools, Greeley, Evans, and Littleton schools are all going remote tomorrow. Douglas County Schools is giving students to the rest of this week, so till Friday before Thanksgiving break, then they'll be remote through the end of the year. A reaction to this has been mixed. We've heard from families and teachers who are happy that the districts are taking the cautious approach, but other families want their kids to be in person and call this essential. Earlier this month, Governor Polis said schools were classified as critical businesses and that they could stay open if they choose, even if there was a stay-at-home order. Obviously, we are seeing most districts deciding to go ahead and close until January when they'll reassess the situation. Nicole Brady, Denver7.
And 3 of the largest school districts in Colorado are now without permanent leadership. Right now, interim superintendents lead Jeffco and Dougco schools, and DPS will be next as Superintendent Susanna Cordova announces she's also stepping down. Parents say the change in leadership is bringing even more uncertainty to a district in crisis.
Such a trailblazer, Susanna Cordova no longer be with us. We're already, in a pandemic and out of panic.
It feels like we are on a ship without a captain.
And some parents say Cordova was pushed out by a school board that never gave her a fair chance. Cordova did not respond to our questions about that, but she did say she was approached by the Dallas School District and says she owed it to herself to consider the opportunity. With the world racing to develop treatments and a vaccine for coronavirus, the Better Business Bureau is warning about scams for clinical trials.
What we're warning about are solicitations over text message or social media message. But the idea is that it offers you a chance to be part of a clinical trial, and the incentive is basically a cash reward.
And the BBB warns clicking on the link could put malware on your computer or take you to a website that asks for personal information to steal your identity. While there are legit clinical trials looking for volunteers, don't click on a random link. You can find a list of verified trials at clinicaltrials.gov. 2 vaccines in the final phases of trials are one step closer to being approved. This morning, Moderna announced that its vaccine is nearly 95% effective. The drug maker says of the 15,000 participants who received this vaccine, only 5 contracted COVID-19, and none became seriously ill. Last week, Pfizer announced its vaccine is more than 90% effective. If the FDA signs off, vaccinations could begin next month.
This is really a historic day, and we hope that because of Moderna and Pfizer's vaccines, which we've already been producing, to have enough by the end of December to vaccinate 20 million of our most vulnerable citizens.
And it is expected that high-risk groups, including healthcare workers, the elderly, and people with underlying medical conditions, would get the vaccine first. It could be available to everyone else by spring. As the COVID-19 cases are hitting record numbers all across the country, President-elect Joe Biden's transition team says they're getting no help from the current administration in smoothly transferring power. ABC's Andrew Dimbert is in Washington, D.C. with the very latest.
With President Trump still refusing to accept that he's lost re-election, some government agencies are not cooperating and coordinating with President-elect Joe Biden's transition to the new administration. Biden's team is being prevented from receiving sensitive and classified national security information. On NBC, his new chief of staff warning it could obstruct COVID-19 vaccine preparations.
Our experts need to talk to those people as soon as possible so nothing drops in this change of power we're going to have on January 20th.
As COVID-19 cases hit record numbers in parts of the country, members of the White House Coronavirus Task Force say President Trump has not attended a meeting in months. Dr. Anthony Fauci on CNN urging the Trump team to work with the incoming Biden administration.
It's almost like passing a baton in a race. You don't want to stop and then give it to somebody. You want to just essentially keep going.
While Biden's camp says they've been left in the dark, Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar declining to say if the president-elect should even be briefed on the progress of a vaccine.
We'll make sure that happens when and if it's appropriate to do that.
Meanwhile, as Trump's election lawsuits continue to crumble, the president went from seeming to acknowledge Biden won in a tweet to claiming it was fraud and that he would never concede. Former President Barack Obama on 60 Minutes urging Trump to put the country first and accept he's lost.
My advice to President Trump is if you want at this late stage in the game to be remembered as somebody who put country first, it's time for you to do the same thing.
And coming up in about 40 minutes, we expect to hear from President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris about the economy and their recovery plan. We will bring you their comments live right here on Denver 7 in an ABC News special report. Today, election officials all across Colorado will begin the process of verifying our election results with a risk-limiting audit. They will audit 3 statewide races and at least 1 race per county to check the tabulation machines.
It's really important. So we do the best audit that we can that really exists at this point on the election. And it enables us to see to a high statistical degree of certainty that the election results are correct.
The Secretary of State's office has until the end of the month to certify Colorado's election results. The Denver Parks Board will take up a controversial issue today, whether to rename Columbus Park to La Raza Park. This park in northwest Denver has been named after Columbus for nearly 100 years. But in the 60s, Chicano activists started calling it La Raza Park.
For the past 60 years, it's been called La Raza Park, informally, just from people who were born and raised in the neighborhood, such as myself.
If the Parks Advisory Board approves the change, it will go to the City Council. More than halfway through the season, and the Broncos are spiraling toward their 4th straight losing season. And this hasn't happened since the early 1970s. It was an ugly game against the Raiders in Las Vegas. The Broncos lost 37-12, giving up 30 points in 4 straight games. Quarterback Drew Lock threw a career-high 4 interceptions in the game. Next up, the 6-3 Dolphins come to Empower Field on Sunday. The CU Buffs are looking for a new opponent for this weekend's game. Saturday's game against Arizona State is canceled because the coronavirus has taken ASU out of play eligibility. The team doesn't have the minimum number of scholarship players available as several players test positive for COVID. CU's athletic director says he is working with the Pac-12 Conference to find a replacement opponent.